And now it is time to welcome our keynote speaker. We are deeply honored to announce our keynote speaker for the AfA Conference 2021, Jane Goodall, a pioneer and visionary. Her journey of service has been extraordinary, to say the least. In July 1960, Jane Goodall began her landmark study of chimpanzee behavior in what is now Tanzania. Her work at Gombe Stream would become the foundation of future primatological research and redefine the relationship between humans and animals. In 1977, Dr. Goodall established the Jane Goodall Institute, which constitutes the Gombe research and is a global leader in the effort to protect chimpanzees and their habitats. The Institute is widely recognized for innovative community-centered conservation and development programs in Africa, and Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots, the global environmental and humanitarian youth program, active in more than 60 countries. Dr. Jane Goodall's honors include the French Legion of Honor, the Medal of Tanzania, and Japan's prestigious Kyoto Prize. In 2002, Dr. Goodall was appointed to serve as a United Nations Messenger of Peace, and in 2003, she was named a Dame of the British Empire. Please welcome Dr. Jane Goodall, DBE.
Hello, this is Jane Goodall, and I want to start off by saying I don't suppose there are many people listening who are much older than me. I'm just entered my 88th year, and so I wanted to begin by saying that although we still have a long way to go in our treatment of animals worldwide, nevertheless, I have seen major change, and more people are beginning to understand that animals aren't just things, that they're not here just for us to use as we wish. When I first went to Cambridge University in 1962, I'd been 2 years in the field studying chimpanzees in Gombe National Park. And my mentor, Dr. Louis Leakey, wrote to tell me that I would need a degree if my scientific peers were to believe what I was saying, because I hadn't been to college at all. But he said there was no time for me to get an undergraduate degree, and he got me a place in Cambridge as the 8th person in their long history to enter for a PhD program without having a prior degree from anywhere. So I was nervous. And when I got there and was told by so many of the professors that I'd done everything wrong, you can imagine how I felt. They told me that I shouldn't have given the chimpanzees names, it was scientific to number them, that I couldn't talk about them having personality or minds capable of solving problems or emotions like happiness, sadness, fear, despair, grief, anger. Why? Because those things were unique to us. And fortunately, when I was young, I had a wonderful teacher, and that teacher taught me that in this respect, these erudite professors were wrong. And that teacher was my dog. Because you can't share your life in a meaningful way with a dog, a cat, a pig, a bear, a horse, a bird, or I don't care what it is, and not know that we are not the only beings on the planet with personality, minds, and above all, emotions. So I was able to hang on to my convictions, and I got my PhD and went back to Gombe to continue observing the chimps and build up a research station. And so I truly believe it was the chimpanzees who helped to change the attitude of Western science, because it wasn't only that they're so like us biologically, And that was becoming clearer and clearer when people realized that we share 98.6% of our DNA with them. But also the behavior I was describing, embracing, kissing, holding hands, patting one another, swaggering, tool using, all these things so similar to the way that we behave. And sadly, there's even a kind of primitive warfare. They can be violent and aggressive, but like us again, they can be compassionate and loving and altruistic. So gradually, science came to understand that we are not the only beings with personalities, minds, and emotions. We're part of and not separate from the rest of the animal kingdom, because once you realize there isn't that line between us and all the others, and as information came in from other long-term field studies about the incredible intelligence of elephants and lions and dolphins and whales, and then more recently the incredible intelligence of some birds, and even the amazing intelligence of the octopus. It's a whole new world out there. We're learning more and more about these animal cousins of ours. And now that we know all this, we also realize that animals like us have their cultures, behavior passed from one generation to the next through observation and imitation and practice. So chimpanzees and whales and all kinds of animals have their own particular cultures. And they all have personalities, and all of them have emotions like contentment, fear, depression, grief, and they all feel pain. So today, in many, many parts of the world, we're still suffering from this COVID-19 pandemic. And this is one of the so-called zoonotic diseases, diseases passed to us by a pathogen jumping from one animal to one person. And when this happens, it may unite with a cell or something in the human body and cause a new disease. Unfortunately for us, this one, COVID-19, happens to be very contagious and it raced around the world. But we need to realize, and more people do realize, that to a very large extent we brought this pandemic on ourselves. It's been predicted by those studying these zoonotic diseases for years and years. And actually 75% of all new human diseases originate in animals in this way. And so what are we doing that's wrong? Well, we're penetrating deeper and deeper into their habitats. Very often we force some species into closer contact with humans. We capture them. We traffic them around the world, or their body parts, to sell in wildlife markets, to sell as food, medicine, clothing, and as pets. And we create conditions in this way that makes it relatively easy for pathogens to jump over from an animal to a human, crossing the species barrier. HIV/AIDS resulted from a chimpanzee in a Central African bushmeat market. Ebola may have originated from handling a gorilla. MERS originated through contact with a domestic Bactrian camel in Saudi Arabia. SARS and now COVID-19 both seem to have originated in wildlife markets in China. Then there's the industrial animal agriculture. Billions of animals, billions and billions of cows and pigs and sheep and ducks and hens around the world crowded together in horrendous conditions in what we call factory farms. And diseases such as mad cow disease, bird flu, swine fever, and many other zoonotic diseases, not all contagious, have started in this way. And what I want to say is this: in all the situations I've just described, we must remember that every one of these animals is an individual. Every one has a personality. Every one of them is capable of feeling fear, despair, and pain. The amount of suffering is so huge that it's hard to imagine. Some of the secretly filmed footage inside factory farms in America and Europe have made I couldn't sleep for nights. Animals treated as though they're mere objects. They're individuals. So we have to think of the way also that animals are treated in medical research laboratories and in so many other ways where we treat them simply as objects that we can use in any way we like. They're here for us to use. So it's very important that this terrible information is more widely understood. And it's even more important that people realize the true nature of animals. And things are changing. That's the good news. The public is becoming increasingly more aware. There are the wildlife documentaries, the secretly filmed footage that I've mentioned. So people are learning more and more, not only about the bad things done to animals, but how wonderful animals are and how worthy they are of our respect and our kindness and our love. But as I say, things are changing. In South Korea, just very recently, the last remaining big breeding place of dogs for their meat just closed down. Many bears, sun bears, moon bears, have been freed from tiny cages where they were milked for their bile, and they've gone into sanctuaries, thanks to Animals Asia and Jill Robinson, who started this campaign. But Jill Robinson is only one now of hundreds of people working to improve things for animals. And the good news, again, when we come to the bears, that there's now an alternative to using their bile. It's a synthetic one. It causes no suffering at all, nor is there any risk of our being contaminated by some bear pathogen. Once people understand the suffering of the bears, they no longer want to use their bile. Pangolins, they're the most trafficked animal in the world. They're trafficked for the supposed medicinal use of their scales. But now, as this became known, China put them on the very top of its endangered animal list, needing the highest level of protection possible. And people will be prosecuted if they buy pangolins for meat or scales. More and more people are joining organizations that seek to educate people, especially young people, about all the things that are happening, but how wonderful animals are. There's my own Roots and Shoots program, which is now in over 60 countries around the world for young people of all ages, all learning how to respect animals for who they are. And, again, as people understand more, conditions are improving everywhere. And the suffering endured by animals snatched from their mothers and used in entertainment, that's being seen less and less. People decide not to go to a circus, for example, if there are performing animals. And we know the training is cruel. So many circuses around the world have closed down. And finally, more and more people are turning to plant-based diets because they begin to understand the suffering of all these domestic farm animals. And pigs especially, they're just as intelligent as dogs, more intelligent than some dogs. And not only is all this industrial agriculture of animals causing immense suffering, it's also very, very damaging to the environment, which I won't go into here. There's now a widespread understanding, growing all the time, that our cats and our dogs need more than food and water and shelter. They need love. They need respect. And more people are understanding that to buy an exotic animal as a pet is not a good thing. These animals belong in the wild or in sanctuaries. And keeping birds in small cages where they can't fly. People are beginning to understand that isn't a respectful way to treat the birds. So we are indeed moving to a future that looks much, much brighter for the animals, and a future where we treat animals with respect, where we acknowledge their right to live lives free of fear. A world where there are wild places where animals can live out their lives in freedom, where there are not more factory farms, where there are alternatives to the use of animals in medical research and testing. Attitudes are changing, and it's thanks to all of you. If it wasn't for people like you and the educators who are doing their bit, then the situation would remain status quo, but it's not. I want to enforce the fact it's changing. And every time we change one mind, every time one more person begins to understand and respect animals and love them for who they are, the world is just that little bit better, one step closer to a future where we can all live together in harmony with nature. So I wish I was with you in person. This is such an important gathering, but thank you for inviting me to share some words with you, and I'm sure you will leave inspired and encouraged to do more. Just remember, every single day you live, you make some impact on the world, and you can choose what sort of impact you make. So have a great conference, and I will say goodbye all the way from the UK, where I've been throughout the pandemic. But I'll end with the chimpanzee greeting. So I bring the voice on the animal I know best, except for dogs, into this gathering. So, see, I'm talking too much. Bye, everyone.
It was indeed such a pleasure to listen to those words by our August keynote speaker, Dr. Jane Goodall, DBE. You've been and are such an inspiration for each one of us. Thank you for taking out the time to be amongst us for this year's Asia for Animals conference. It was indeed an honor